Alright, today's video is pretty special. It's my first Q&A, and it's a chance that a lot of you have really taken the opportunity to ask me some questions that may or may not be related to gaming, may or may not be related about me, my person, and my history, but are just all some things that apparently y'all would really like to know. So I would love to give you whatever you have asked for. But first off, I'm gonna give you something I know a lot of you have asked for, but not really directly, and that is... yes! This is my hair. All like 20 pounds of it. And sorry, but I just washed it and it never looks good. Just washed. So yeah, here it is. So now that we've answered the question of if I am bald or not, we can get on to some of the questions you've actually asked. And the first question from Emerald Flare is, why did you want to start covering indie games in the first place? And that actually is a question that's kind of difficult to answer because it has a lot of parts. There's the obvious consideration of price. I mean, if I'm going to cover games at all, I can't really afford to be covering the huge AAA games. But the side of the coin that doesn't have anything to do with the monetary aspects is because indie games are where people really get to tell stories, and not just really good, vivid stories, but stories that are uniquely their own. And for me personally, I'm a reader, and I love more than a good story, good authorship. And so when a person can put their heart into something and develop their characters and push a truly unique story forward, that to me is really exciting. And besides indie games being like free $99 up to $5-10, so you actually can get a handle on experiencing a lot of what's out there, a lot of what's out there doesn't have to conform to the big giant AAA standards and appease the mass media. And so in a sense, indie games are really true freedom of expression for developers, and I just really enjoy seeing how they see the world. But moving on to question number 2, RiggsHB asks, do you buy most of your games or developers actually give you codes? And to answer that one, again, it has a couple parts. A lot of developers do send me a lot of codes now that the channel's actually growing a bit, but most of the codes and attention I'm getting are from Steam developers because, again, that's where indie developers flourish the most. However, it seems that most of the channel's subscribers are real huge Switch fans, so I've been trying, mostly if I'm covering anything, to at least give a preference to games that are coming out or already out on the Switch. So as it stands right now, if I'm going to cover a Steam game, yeah, it was probably free, but if I'm covering a Switch game, it's a 50-50 that I had to pay for it myself. Moving on to the next question from Let's Go Mimikyu, who brought this one in on Twitter. What is the criteria for a game being reviewed? Now that question, that's definitely going to spoil the magic of the channel right there. The criterion is definitely completely random. I'm definitely gaming all the time and recording my capture footage from my own personal experiences with the games, but the day I'm gonna do a review, I cruise to the eShop and I go through the best deals or the newest releases, and if there's anything that's remotely under $5, I'm probably gonna wanna cover that game that day, especially if it's on a sale that's only gonna last for a few more days. Otherwise, if the indie titles don't look interesting, if it seems like I've covered a lot of the same genre back to back, I'm probably gonna pick a different game or even go ahead and purchase a game that I don't have a code for, just to make sure that there's some variety on the channel every single week. So even if I have played, say, 4 roguelikes in a row, I'm definitely not going to be posting 4 roguelike videos in a row. So in a sense, the criterion is, have I recently covered this type of game? Is it cheap enough to be called a budget game? And do I think it's going to actually be interesting to the fans? And so in a sense, yeah, there are some criterion, but it really works out to be kind of random and definitely an on-the-spot call. The next question from RP Genie is, do you enjoy all of the genres you play, or do you have a preference? This one is super easy to answer because it's no, I don't enjoy all of the genres I play. Just like a fine wine, I can appreciate a flavor even if I don't like it. And for some indie genres, which actually I'm growing more and more of a palate for the ones that I play, some of them, I'm just not good at them. Roguelikes and roguelites, I guess I just don't have the reflexes for them, so I can make it pretty far, but I don't think I'll ever be able to beat anything like Dead Cells. And while I definitely enjoy playing the games, knowing that I'll never be able to beat them just because of that death mechanic does make me have less of an appreciation for the genre. But that's because I grew up playing RPGs, so yeah, if we're gonna have a preference, RPGs, love them. Moving on to the next question from Filthy Banana. What trend in indie games would you like to see go the way of the buffalo? Now, if y'all aren't up on your Southwestern American history, the buffalo is pretty much a near extinct animal because of overhunting, so what he's basically asking is there a gaming trend that I would like to see not nearly as prevalent as it once was or is currently? And yeah, there is, and it's crazy because the answer is what I think to me very specific, but it might seem very inspecific if you don't quite know what I'm talking about. And that is with a lot of indie developers, especially the newer ones or the smaller companies, they find kind of a niche with the games, and then they just go with that niche all the way to the wall as fast as they can, and they end up producing a game that's really unbalanced or cashes in way too much on one element and just kind of forgets about everything else. And if we look at games like Neon Wall or anything else that's on that playlist of avoid these titles, you're gonna definitely find out what I mean. Because those are generally examples of where a game is all about one thing and forgets about the player. So in short, yeah, I'd like to see developers actually focus on the experience that is provided through gaming instead of just how they can demonstrate their prowess in one particular technical aspect of the game. And the next question from Riggs HB is, what are some of your favorite non-indie Nintendo Switch titles? And in all honesty, this question threw me for a loop because most of my gaming is indie games, and I think almost every Switch game I've played or owned has been an indie title. But if I'm gonna be honest, games like Skyrim, the bigger open world RPGs, because I originally got hooked on Morrowind Elder Scrolls 3 for the PC, back when I built my first gaming computer. And then of course the Mario titles and Mario and Rabbids, just because, I mean, that's like the modern reiteration of those, again, classic games. But games like Pokemon Let's Go, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and even Minecraft are some of my more favorite titles. But moving on along the same line of questioning from Digital Forward is, what is your favorite game? And this is like asking somebody who has thousands of DVDs what their favorite movie is, or asking a musical composer what their favorite song is. It's just really, really hard to pick, but if I had to pick one, I think I could. Though I am going to be honest, it's a bit of a toss-up between three classic games that are definitely not for the Switch or any modern console, and that is Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, or Legend of Dragoon. And these were all foundational games in my personal gaming life for all different reasons. Chrono Trigger introduced me to just this mind-blowing experience in the RPG genre, again, that really stretched the mind. I mean, at such an early age, dealing with concepts like time travel and team and party building dynamics, and gaming choices that actually mattered in the game, unlike the early platformers like Mario. And it just gave me this utter fascination for what gaming could be. Moving on to Chrono Cross for the PS1, it shocked me and blew me away with its graphic quality, while still preserving those same gaming elements from Chrono Trigger. Massive levels of story and character development and plot twists and overlying storylines and time switches and character recruitment, kind of like Suikoden. But at that point in my life playing on the early PS1, I realized that gaming was not just about beating a game, it was literally an experience. And as opposed to Chrono Trigger that showed me what gaming could be, Chrono Cross showed me what gaming should be, which is an advanced experience that is something that you can't have in your everyday life. And in a sense, it was a way to live a story. Legend of Dragoon, though, also for the PlayStation, if you've ever played it, was a 4-disc game that took hundreds of hours to beat. Leveling up, skill trees, character development, it was the first JRPG I think I'd ever really played, and one of the few that I'd ever played that required a real commitment to the characters, only to watch them go through trials and tribulations that you as the player have no power to save them from. And as a teenager, that was a bit of an emotional roller coaster, and I don't think I could ever forget about that game. But having to pick one, I'd have to say probably Chrono Cross. And since I've now used a ton of time on that one question, I think I need to move on. The next question from Matt Fox, also brought in from Twitter, is, what is your favorite game of all time, favorite game on the Switch, and worst game you've ever played? I think I've already addressed the favorite game of all time, but favorite game on the Switch, I'd probably have to say, and please don't hate me for this, but Stardew Valley. It's just so relaxing and so beautiful and so well done, and they've accounted for a lot, and the developer's really active and constantly releasing updates and patches. And even though, yeah, it is just a little farming simulator, I don't know why, but I just love it. It's great, it's peaceful. But moving on to the what's the worst game I've ever played. That's a good one. As I'm sure you know if you have checked out the Avoid These Titles playlist, there's a lot of games that I regret playing, but the worst one is probably Ikimu. It's an absolute failure in its sound quality, its dark visuals, and just its game mechanics with all of its glitches and bugs. And there's absolutely no reason a player would ever want to play the game. There's no story, the characters are based on Eskimos who fight with fishing knives, and other sort of definitely racially charged antagonistic kind of characters, and it's just horrible, and I had to pay for it. So yeah, worst game I've ever played among all of the ones that I kind of regret playing and definitely wish I could get my money back is probably Ikimu. But I mean, that is a really close second between games like Maria the Witch and Hollow. But moving on to the next question from Poison, what is your favorite game that nobody else seems to like? You really put me on the spot here with this one, Poison. But my favorite game that nobody else seems to like, or at least a game that nobody else seems to be paying attention to, is a puzzle game called Nucleon. It's a little indie title, and it's a puzzle game, and there's not much to it, and honestly, if you know the numbers 1 through 9, you can definitely play it all the way to the end. But it depends on your personal ability to quickly induce a sort of pattern recognition with a split second you're given to look at the screen, and then select the numbers on screen as they they appear depending on what game mechanic mode you're playing in. Whether it's counting down from 9 to 1 or 1 to 9, or busting different blocks into numbers and trying to pick circles or squares, it's really difficult, and actually, like, it makes you feel like you're developing a quicker cognition. But honestly, it's kind of a self-learning puzzle game, and yeah, I don't really think anybody really likes it, but I do. But moving on to the next question, we have from Dennis Scat. Would you ever consider reviewing indie or budget titles on other platforms? The answer to this one is a definite yes, and like I answered earlier in the video, yeah, I do get codes a lot for Steam games. And I think I have actually even reviewed one PS4 title indie game, but the thing with that is definitely the way the viewership for the channel is going, most people are expecting and wanting the reviews for the Switch games, so that's kind of what I've been leaning toward, definitely privileging the Switch games over Steam, Xbox, and PS4. So yeah, 100%, and definitely if a fan actually suggests one, I'm totally fine covering it, but it's probably going to be on a Wednesday just by how the numbers work out. But as the channel grows and develops, and if I'm actually able to make this more than just kind of an after hours gig and cover more than 3 games a week, what I'd really like to do is expand it and have kind of different budget gamer channels for each console. And especially focusing on Steam, because that is actually where a lot of the titles that eventually make it to other consoles start out. But we're gonna have to wait until the channel grows a little bit more and I actually have more time to do these kinds of things. But moving on to the next question from Cake5171 is, would you ever develop your own game? Yes. Yes, I would. If I knew how or remotely had the skills, or even knew people who had the skills, I would absolutely love to take all the experience I've gained by reviewing these hundreds of indie games over the last year and put it toward developing a game that I think would be a legitimate and rich experience for the player. As a reader and actually as a rhetorical composition instructor at the university here, I do really enjoy reading and writing, but that's going to rely on me getting on board with some people who actually know what they're doing as far as programming goes. But moving on to the next question, Matthew Hutcherson asks, do you keep your daily job and YouTube live separate, or do your colleagues get all the juicy insider details? This one's kind of fun because yes, I do keep those lives separate. Definitely I keep my daily life out of my YouTube life, but keeping my YouTube life out of my daily life isn't really by choice. In all honesty, most of my friends aren't gamers and don't really enjoy it all that much. I mean, I'm still finishing my dissertation and I teach, so most of the people I work with are academics, and a lot of them kind of laughingly look down on gaming and gamers. So even though they all know that I host a gaming review YouTube channel and I'm always talking about the last thing I'm doing, they don't really care, to put it politely. But moving on to the next question from Matt Fox, he says, you mentioned you spent some time in South Korea. What was it like? How were the games? How were the people? And did they treat you differently, because you're either bald or because they were jealous of your hair? Yes, I did actually spend a good few months on 2 different occasions in South Korea. I'm actually conversationally fluent in Korean, and the first time I went out was as the director of a language program, and the second time when I went back most recently was actually to take part in a higher level language program. The first time I had shorter hair, crew cut. I'm actually, this is the first time in my life I've actually had longer hair. So the last time I went back, when it was just below shoulder length, you could definitely tell a difference in the way that I was treated because of the hair. I was referred to a lot as Sang Namja, which basically is like Sang meaning high, Namja meaning man, so like manly man. And a lot of people address the long hair as a display of freedom. And while some of the older community definitely wrote it off as me being American, a lot of the younger community looked up to me for it as a display actually of having more of a command over my own life. So yeah, depending on the circumstances, it was pretty cool. In some cases, I definitely wanted to tie it back and make it look as short as possible, because I was also meeting dignitaries every once in a while and definitely had daily interactions with school principals, provosts, and government representatives. But just out on the town, yeah, it was super awesome. As far as games go though, definitely a huge lean toward the computer games and PCs. If you've seen the esports, StarCraft, League of Legends, stuff like that, those are massive. And gamers in those senses are definitely treated like athletes, but console gaming is, I don't want to say it's almost more for kids, but it's definitely something that's regarded as a lot more casual than PC gaming. But overall, answering what it was like, it was awesome, and I really can't wait to go back. Moving on to the next question though from Poison is, what are your future aspirations for YouTube and otherwise? Which has also been asked by Angel, asking what my future plans are and my goals for the YouTube channel, as well as real life personal aspirations. The goals for the channel, I definitely want to take this away from being an after hours thing that I managed to squeeze in between research projects and really make it like a full-time gig. I'd really like to be able to hire someone to help me do the editing, because honestly each of these videos takes me between 5 and 6 hours just to do the foundational work, not including custom making each of the thumbnails or even recording or getting the game recording, which also takes between 3 and 5 5 hours. So if I could have someone help me cut down some of that editing time, I could definitely put out a lot more videos. And while I'm definitely not doing the review video to make a buck off of it, if this could be actually developing into something that would be a source of income, that's when I could start covering multiple consoles and putting out at least double the amount of videos. As far as personal aspirations and personal future dreams though, I am like a couple of months away from getting my doctorate, so I really hope that I can get a professorship somewhere, either in teaching ESL or rhetorical composition to native speakers, or going into program administration with testing development and curriculum development. But I'm still waiting on some callbacks for those kind of jobs. So moving on to the next question, and Digital Forward asks, what are your goals in life? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And what are your hobbies other than gaming? Well, I'd have to say that the goal in life is definitely to obtain some sort of financial freedom and security, as well as to kind of leave my mark on the world. But where I see myself in 5 years is definitely employed at a given university, probably in the US, but kind of starting to lead towards South Korea. And if not working full-time at a university, working full-time on the YouTube channel. But as far as hobbies other than gaming are concerned, I love to cook. I have a huge codependent English Mastiff. She's about 9 years old, so she's getting on the older end for a large dog, and weighs about 170 pounds, so she takes a lot of love and requires a lot of attention. But other than that, if I ever have time, reading. I really enjoy reading. Whether it's fantasy like the Name of the Wind series, or whether it's more sci-fi like Ready Player One, stories like that with their amazing writing and excellent plot development just take me away to another place and help me forget about bills to pay or projects that are due, or all of the different people in my life that need time or help doing something. But moving on to the more personal questions, Matt Fox asks, we've never seen your legs. Do you have two? Where are you from? Age? And do you have little budget gamers of your own? I do have 2 legs, and I would show them to you, but I'm sitting down and repositioning the camera is kind of a pain because it changes the lighting every time I touch it. I do have 2 legs though. As far as my age though, I can tell you my first games were definitely Mario and Duck Hunt, and I was still in diapers, so that's a little hint for you there. But what I can safely assume is that all of us are pretty much in the same age range. Originally, I'm from a little farming town just north of Houston called Conroe, which is just a really southern hickish way of mispronouncing the words cornrow. And I actually grew up on a little plot of land with a fair amount of animals, goats, chickens, rabbits, what have you, and we grew a lot of our own vegetables, herbs, and even fruits. It wasn't exactly the most lavish lifestyle, and you were lucky if you got to see a neighbor. But since then, in order to actually get into college, I joined the Air Force and have been pretty much everywhere since then. But as far as little bitty budget gamers, no, that is still way off for the future. Nothing against kids, actually probably do want some someday, but as I'm still finishing a degree and don't really have a solid future nailed down just yet, I don't want to introduce more kids into the world to subject them to me. Not until I can provide for them. And moving on to the last question of the video, which is from Poison, who asks, what is the airspeed velocity of an African swallow? I have to ask you to clarify laden or unladen. And favorite movie of all time, probably gonna go with Predator 1, just as a quick answer. And if you're traveling at the speed of light and turn on a light, what happens? And to that, though this is just a hypothesis, I'd say you'd probably trip the light fantastic. And as that is the last question, thank you all for playing and taking part in the very first Q&A video on the Budget Gamer channel. My name is Cody, and I have been happy to be your host, so as always, thanks for watching.